And now, let me introduce our keynote speaker. Maribel Pérez Wadsworth is President and CEO of the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. Born and raised in Miami by immigrant parents from Cuba, she is the first woman and seventh president to lead the foundation. Drawing on her experience as the former president of Gannett Media and publisher of USA Today, she brings a deep commitment to Knight's mission of informing and engaging communities. Starting as an editorial assistant with the Associated Press in 1994, her career evolved from reporter and editor roles to a key position in Gannett's corporate team, where she led the company's digital transformation. As president of the USA Today Network and later publisher of USA Today, she led a team of more than 4,000 journalists in more than 200 communities. During her tenure, Gannett newsrooms were recognized with 5 Pulitzer Prizes. After her remarks, she'll be joined in conversation by Dean Brown. Their conversation will conclude with some questions from our audience here in Gainesville. If any of you have questions, there are 3x5 cards on your tables. Jot them down, legibly would be good, and we'll collect them during the session and try to get to as many of them as we can. Maribel?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for that introduction, Rick. And thank you, Nathan and Dean, and to all of you at the University of Florida College of Journalism and Communications for inviting me here this morning. And I want to thank you all for joining us as we celebrate state-level accountability journalism. Whether you're with us in person or online, most of all, thank you to all of the journalism and communications students who are here with us today for being part of the symposium, but even more for your vote of confidence in the future of journalism. Journalism is a noble profession. It exists to inform our communities, to empower civic engagement. It helps to uncover facts, seek the truth, provide context, and it exists, as Nathan said, to hold power to account on behalf of the public. It exists to shine a light on problems, but also to elevate solutions, and by doing so, hopefully, to drive progress. Journalism is an act of optimism. Why would we ask the hard questions, file the FOIA requests, sift through hours of public records, engage with often difficult sources, sometimes make people angry or uncomfortable, if not because we believe that wrongs can be made right, that solutions to our greatest challenges can be found? Journalism truly is an act of optimism. It's fundamentally a belief that the public, armed with truth, will demand solutions, that things can get better, and that positive change and progress will come. It's no secret that the business of journalism, and especially at the local and state level, faces great challenges. But the need for journalism, ambitious, impactful, hard-hitting, accountability journalism, like we're honoring today, has never been more important. I won't pretend to have all the answers to how we solve the crisis of the business model for journalism or the crisis in our public square, where we suffer from erosion of trust, a disregard for facts, and a disillusion of constructive debate and civil discourse. But I do know that we won't solve any of these challenges without journalism, and especially without local journalism. And we won't solve any of it either without the rising generation of smart and ambitious and well-trained journalists like we have here at the University of Florida. Since our founding 75 years ago, the Knight Foundation has been focused on supporting journalism as a necessary cornerstone for thriving communities and for strengthened democracy. In the last 2 decades, we've been focused on helping the business of journalism reinvent itself to meet the economic realities of the digital era. We've supported new and startup digital newsrooms. We've supported the transformation of existing newsrooms. We've supported nonprofits and for-profits, and the conversion of legacy for-profits to nonprofits. And we're deeply committed to supporting our student journalists, especially with the legal resources they need to do their most ambitious work. Certainly, we have a standard bearer here in the independent Florida Alligator, doing incredibly ambitious work that is making an enormous difference. And I know you're all very proud, yes. Today, a pillar of Knight support for journalism comes in the form of Press Forward. It's a national collaboration of funders that's leveraging local knowledge and local leadership to help power the future for local news. It's a disciplined effort to build sustainable local news organizations that can survive and thrive into the future. And as part of Knight's commitment to Press Forward, we have doubled our investment in journalism to $300 million over 5 years. We're also responding to more immediate needs. This summer, Knight Foundation joined with several other philanthropic partners to establish a public media bridge fund, an initiative that has now raised nearly $60 million to provide emergency funding for the more than 115 public media stations serving 43 million Americans that were at risk of imminent closure with the defunding of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. In many communities across the country, these public stations are often the only reliable source of crucial local and state news coverage, and also of emergency broadcast alerts. They're the center of gravity of their communities in many ways, and so this crucial runway will allow them the time to develop alternative sustainable funding plans and the systems change that needs to happen to preserve the system into the future. We're also continuing to stand strong for the First Amendment at a time when it is clearly increasingly under threat. Last December, we awarded a 3-year grant of nearly $1 million to the Bruckner Center for the Advancement of the First Amendment here at the University of Florida. It's a partnership between the College of Journalism and Communication and the Levin College of Law. It's a research center studying information quality and looking for ways that social media platforms can incentivize users to engage with higher quality information. All of these are efforts to strengthen and bolster the overall information ecosystem, to hopefully reclaim our public square and to create a foundation for more accountability journalism. High quality journalism has been under threat before. Yellow journalism was going to destroy objective reporting, and television was going to destroy newspapers. The internet was going to usher in an era of utopia of free and factual information. Today, I'm confident that journalism will continue to exist, and we cannot allow it to fail. Journalism and local reporting brings our communities together, and it is crucial to successful self-government and to sustaining democracy. Journalism lets people know what happens at City Hall, at the State House, at our school boards. It reports on our kids' sports triumphs and our neighbors' new businesses. It holds power to account so that we know that our water is clean and our public officials are honest and that our trash is getting picked up as planned. Journalism also helps us to know who we're voting for and what the important issues are that are at stake in our elections. And it delivers crucial information in the wake of natural disasters. At Knight Foundation, we are fully committed to healthy information ecosystems and reliable, trustworthy local news. But while we are working to build better systems, it is not sufficient. Our society also needs smart, creative, innovative people to drive change, to drive improvement, and to deliver news and information in the ways that will resonate and be relevant to audiences today. For journalism to thrive, it needs the energy and ambition of the young people in this room, the people who've grown up with the internet, with vertical video and snaps and TikToks and Reels, who know how their peers will consume news and information, what will be relevant and resonant for them. Journalism is an act of optimism. The future of this business lies in the next generation of journalists, in the students and educators committed to telling the truth and to doing so in ways that will connect. And so let me say to the students in the room here today, we're counting on you. I'm counting on you to help us charge forward and to lead us to a better future. We're counting on you to master this craft, to drive the innovation that's needed, to work with integrity, and to bring all those skills to the important work of local and state reporting. I firmly believe that there is no greater contribution you can make to society than taking what you've learned here at the University of Florida and bringing it back to the places you come from, to the communities you deeply care about, and to do journalism that matters and will make an impact there. We need your voices, we need your optimism, and with your help, I know we can build a brighter future for journalism across the country. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maribel. That was wonderful. So we're going to have a little conversation here. And you all can join us again. There are cards on the tables if you want to ask some questions yourselves. I have a few.
I'd expect nothing less.
Indeed. And it's very interesting because, I mean, so much of what you say resonates, journalism being an act of optimism. One of the things that you said in February, and I was in the room, I remember this, is that you believe that philanthropy must move at the speed of news. I thought that was a great quote. And it's a great idea. And you talked about some ways that that's already happening. Yeah. Do you think you've achieved the goal so far?
Oh goodness, no, we've started on that path. And I think there are some good examples of that. You know, of course you heard, I come from the world of newsrooms and journalism and fast pace and high pressure. So coming into philanthropy where maybe there aren't always those same outside pressures, you really, I think, need to be guided by the needs of the community and the people you're trying to serve. And that has to make us move a lot more swiftly. The timeline is not in our favor as relates to solving for the sustainability of journalism. So there's no time for dawdling. A few things that we have done that I think have been important, even to show what's possible. We, for example, the Public Media Bridge Fund I just mentioned, it is unusual for a number of funders to get together and to be able to, especially in partnership, move that quickly. $60 million raised in about 11 weeks' time and already beginning to be distributed back to stations shows everybody that yes, we can move quickly when the moment demands it. Showing even within our own team, you know, last year, Hurricane Helene had such devastating effects. Yes. We were able to move dollars very, very quickly to shore up local news organizations in North Carolina to help with that coverage. So I just think we have to show in each instance. I think there's a lot more to do, though.
Press Forward itself was an example of moving quickly, of responding. And there's so much that came from that and still will come from that. Press Forward last month released a report, Words That Work, a toolkit for newsrooms. In it, they recommended a couple of different things. They recommended being cautious about the words journalism and media and even democracy. Yeah. The report said, and I'm quoting, here's the paradox: 93% of people believe that reliable local news is necessary for democracy. Yet many of these same people react negatively to explicit democracy messaging. What are people in journalism to do with that?
Well, I'll tell you what my own thoughts on this are. And to put some context around it, this survey was meant to help. One of the things that Press Forward has set out to do is to bring a lot of new dollars into funding local journalism. So people and organizations that maybe have funded other things but are newer to journalism. So they're trying to find the right language to motivate that. And look, at the end of the day, these concepts can feel very abstract.
Yes.
Right? Democracy and journalism and very lofty ideals. At the end of the day, I think we need to go back to the basics of journalism, which is a lot more show, not tell. Let's show the impact. Let's speak with transparency about the work that's happening and the cause and effect. You do the accountability story, you find that your tax dollars are being misspent, and that gets righted. Make sure that you're showing those examples. I think being more clear about what journalism actually does is more important than talking about the ideals. We all believe them in this room. Obviously, we are all here because we believe in the power of journalism and how crucial it is to democracy, to self-government. But I think that for the vast majority of the public, they're going to resonate far more with you were able to call out that the mayor was embezzling funds, or that this, and it can't all be bad stuff either, by the way. There's a lot of good that happens in communities, and making sure we're telling that full, authentic story is another way that I think is really important. So to me, it's let's worry less about abstract things, and let's be really concrete about the difference that journalism makes, with clear examples of the work and tying it back to where the difference is being made, where a problem is being highlighted, but also potential solutions. And I think that is very motivating to people.
What do you think about being more transparent with methods and our own? Because we talk about accountability, and we're advancing that conversation, but at the same time, we do have people who say, well, you're not very open about your own processes.
I don't think there's anything more important that we can do to reestablish in some cases, and certainly to grow trust again for news, than to be super transparent about our methods. How did we report this story? What efforts did we go to? How many records did we pour through? How many people did we talk to? What, just the story behind the story. Be very transparent, and then also be transparent about your own expertise. Some people have been covering beats for a long time. Explain that. You're also a part of the community. Speak to those connections. You're not some outsider who parachutes into the community. Be really transparent about that. I think the more we can, just demystify the craft of journalism and be very transparent about how we do the work, I think it'll help to build trust again.
Absolutely. Northwestern University, they just released their State of Local News report. Now, both that and the Institute for Nonprofit News report indicated that while nonprofit journalism is growing and maturing, sustainability, of course, remains uneven. Smaller newsrooms still rely on a small number of major donors. What are the bright spots that you see, though, in the media landscape? There are those kinds of challenges, but we do have bright spots. What are they? How do they sustain themselves beyond infusions from philanthropy?
Yeah, look, as some people have heard me say this often, philanthropy certainly can't be the business model. That can only be a piece of the pie. At the end of the day, what's going to make it sustainable? You're going to be creating a product that the community sees value in, that feels is essential, and they're going to, hopefully want to support that. And I think that that's ultimately the win. I think that even as a lot of new startups have come onto the scene, probably not all of them will make it to the other side, right? And in terms of finding that equilibrium of bringing in enough revenue to support the operation, I think we'll see the need for greater collaboration across them, and we're certainly seeing examples of that. But there absolutely are bright spots. Look, I mean, the Baltimore Banner is a tremendous example where they just launched in 2022 and won a Pulitzer last year. And they're now expanding from Baltimore into Montgomery County, Maryland. And so are they, they're swinging for the fences, and they have, committed ownership, which is obviously a positive. They're not quite there yet in terms of, for sure having the level of profitability that I know that they're aiming for. But they're making moves, and they're doing ambitious work, and I think that's really important. The Salt Lake Tribune is another example. That's been a long time news organization, previously for profit, has made the switch to nonprofit. They're in expansion mode. So I think we see across the spectrum, from a startup like the Banner. The Minneapolis Star Tribune is another one that is investing and expanding to be more of a statewide player. I think that there are bright spots all over the place. I just think that at the same time, we have to be clear-eyed that not all of our newer newsrooms, not all of our legacy newsrooms are going to be able to make it if they are not truly connecting with an audience and creating the value proposition that generates support, not only philanthropically, but through local readers and viewers wanting to contribute to that, and local businesses wanting to support it as well.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. We are at this point where we see 1,000 experiments, it seems, and those are really great ones. Are we at a point where we're kind of, if you look at the entire landscape, that we're sort of at a break even, where there's enough positive things that are going on that we can say, yeah, there are some pathways that we can actually recommend?
I think look, there are a number of them, and I think that it's time to be a little bit patient, and also learn and share what we're learning that's working, and certainly that's something that we can do. And there are a lot of organizations, INN, you'll hear from Karen soon, is a real example of sharing best practices and examples of collaboration and models that are working. So I don't know that I can say that we're done experimenting.
Well, yeah.
For sure, I think there's a lot more work to be done there, but I do see that there are certain things that are taking hold, and so how can we put more wind in the backs of those, scale those things, and maybe have others pivot toward what's working.
Okay. I have a couple more questions, but I think we have some that are coming up, are we? Maybe. Well, while that's being collated there, it's really a fast-moving landscape. You had talked earlier about sort of the inflection point for democracy. You mentioned that in February, that we are at an inflection point. It's been 8 months, 9 months. What do you think's happened since?
I don't think I was wrong about that.
Yeah.
I think what we were starting to talk about then, and I think is only increasingly true, is the First Amendment's under assault. We see that. Right out of the gate, early part of the year. Pushing AP, removing AP from the press pool
Yes.
at the White House over their decision to keep Gulf of Mexico in the AP style book. Imagine a global news organization needing to serve global audiences all over the country, not deciding to only go with the so-called Gulf of America, which the United States had unilaterally decided to rename, and being pushed out of the press pool. I mean, that clearly is an assault on speech and on the press. The request or the insistence that Pentagon reporters needed to basically agree that they would only write about things that were in essence approved. Well, obviously we can't do that. We can't agree to that. That's preposterous, and again, an assault on freedom of the press. And so, those are two examples. There are myriad examples. We see it across the board, and that's only as relates to the press. I think we forget sometimes that, the First Amendment guarantees 5 freedoms, and we're certainly seeing encroachment on, the ability to freely assemble and all of those things. So I'm very worried about that.
Yes.
And if you're Knight Foundation, our whole reason for being in many ways is the First Amendment and ensuring that it remains strong. And I am a firm believer that we're only as free as Americans as the First Amendment is strong. And so that is something that I think, and look, when we talk about those 5 freedoms of the First Amendment, they really are what define the people's power in a democracy. The ability to assemble, the ability to speak freely, the freedom of the press, to petition your government for a redress of grievance. All of that speaks to the power of the people. So that's the firewall for democracy. And we, the people, need to not lose sight of that. But it worries me when the Freedom Forum puts out their latest survey and fewer than a quarter of Americans can name the 5 freedoms. I'm not going to put anybody on the spot, but if you can't rattle them off, please, when you leave here today, that's your first assignment. Go make sure you know what those 5 freedoms are, because they are your power. They are our power in self-government, and it's going to be crucially important that we fight for that.
Absolutely. Much of Knight's focus in recent years has been on nonprofit ecosystem, and but there still are legacy news organizations out there. They're still reaching significant audiences. Yes. And they're still doing accountability work in a lot of different communities. So what's the balance for Knight in terms of how it views supporting institutions like that? Is there a role when it comes to talking with and working with some of those legacy organizations?
Absolutely. I think that, early on, there was no question. Knight was very committed, always will be very committed to the experimentation, to learning, what new models might be able to be fruitful. But over this last year and a half, we have absolutely leaned in also to legacy newsroom expansions. We created an expansion fund that helped to fund efforts like at the Salt Lake Tribune, at Post and Courier in the Carolinas, who are also long-standing local newsrooms that we're expanding into other parts of the state. I think those are just a couple examples. The Associated Press, we gave the Associated Press last year. And soon we'll announce another investment, but we gave them a commitment to pilot what it would look like if we could subsidize access to AP content and services to the small and mid-size newsrooms across the country that don't have the ability necessarily to pay for AP content in that model, but that could help bolster their efforts to have a more complete report and to maintain AP's important 50-state footprint and coverage from state houses. And the results of that have been, really positive. And again, it's legacy media, but I think an important part of the ecosystem.
Very much so. Here, of course, we're at the University of Florida. We have a lot of boots on the ground, as I like to say, in terms of journalism. And you mentioned, of course, the importance of the independent Florida Alligator in that, and our student journalists out there. How do Knight see the part that students can play right now, instead of waiting for the future, studying for the future, being part of the present when it comes to getting into some of those places where we don't have where we might have news deserts, we don't have outlets.
Well, what I'm most thrilled about is they're not waiting. They are out there doing incredibly important reporting in their communities, and not just the university communities. They're doing incredibly important coverage and filling gaps in the broader community. You certainly see it here in Gainesville. We have helped to support efforts like that in other parts of the country. We just did several $1 million in legal resource support for student journalists specifically, because as you do more and more ambitious work, you run into the exact same problems that so-called professional journalists will run into with access to records and and everything, including intimidation tactics and other things. We've seen journalists arrested and all of that. So it's really important. I am a firm believer. We're in a fight, and you don't want anyone off the playing field right now. And our student journalists are journalists, and they're in it. They're not waiting. They're doing incredibly good, award-winning work in many cases, and work that's really shining a light in places that others are not. So I think we should all be really proud and, again, feel very optimistic about the future for journalism.
Please, students, feel encouraged. You know that you're making a difference right now.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Rick, you have some questions? Let's we'll do a few crowd questions here. Oh, very good. Okay, so first one. What's the impact? What do you see as the impact of artificial intelligence on the next iterations of journalism out there?
I'm someone who really sees both sides of this. On the one hand, of course, the incredible speed at which, and in particular, generative AI has taken hold, is allowing the information ecosystem to be flooded with new content. And it's made it very easy to create and share information that is, let's say, not necessarily fact-based. And so that, especially in this moment of time when there's already a lack of trust and what have you, is, really concerning, and I think really difficult to combat, but important to combat. The flip side is that these advances in technology, I think, are also great opportunities. They create opportunities for us to, leverage the technology to mine important insight from public records at enormous speed, to synthesize information, frankly, to create ways for the public to interact with our content in new and different and interesting ways, to have more effective ability to search our content. I think all of those things are important. We should be experimenting. We should be harnessing the power of the technology, even as we're also, as journalists do, still bearing allegiance to important ethical standards and guardrails that are critically important as we use the technology. But we are absolutely in a space right now where the speed at which that's moving is, can feel dizzying, and it's important that we, going back to your earlier point about transparency in how we do our work. No time has ever been more important than right now to be very clear about the standards, the practices, the ethics of journalism, to explain our work, and because that will be absolutely a differentiator in a world where so much other content is out there, and you don't necessarily understand the provenance of that, and you don't understand the methodology by which they arrived at that content. And so I think that level of transparency, the show the work, will be actually really helpful to us.
Absolutely, and that basically means that when we're talking about a story where perhaps a reporter has used artificial intelligence maybe to do some of the research or even to come up with the angle of the story, that we acknowledge that.
Absolutely, always be transparent. If you don't have it already, and I think most probably do, but if you don't, you need to incorporate artificial intelligence into your newsroom's principles of ethical conduct, and be very clear about how you disclose when you're using artificial intelligence, for sure.
Absolutely. We talked a lot about holding people to account, and there's obviously a lot of different ways that we can do that, and we've talked about the resistance so often to that on the part of local officials, and it seems to me like that's when we talk about that inflection point that you mentioned, that's really where it's really coming down, is this sort of training the public officials, sort of training their anger and their ire on journalists and yelling fake news and doing those sorts of things. Are there new things that we can be doing? Are there things that reporters can be doing to really face that down and to find ways to connect through that noise to the audience?
Yeah. This is going to be an exercise in all that's old is new again. Forever in journalism, and I've been doing this work for a long, long time, of course, we did the hard stories, the investigative journalism, the watchdog work. And we did that and had impact and made a difference and had credibility and trust because we were also doing all the other stories, right? We were not only writing the look what we found and how money's being misspent, but we were talking about, the mayor's initiative, fighting blight in such and such neighborhood. We were in a place where scarcity of resources was not as big a problem. We were covering the full community, truly. We were in our schools, not just covering the school board and what good or bad may be happening there, but we were in our schools, we were celebrating our kids' achievement, whether in sports or other things. We're covering arts and culture. You're seeing a much bigger picture of the community. And so today, I think in some ways, in part because of this business model challenge, we've pulled back on a lot of that coverage. And you ask 100 newsrooms, where can they add the most unique value? And almost all, I dare say all, will say accountability journalism, watchdog journalism, and certainly I agree with that. But if that's the only thing you're giving a community, the community feels that you're not actually authentically seeing the whole community, because not everything that's happening is bad. Not everything that is going on in a community that's worth writing about is a problem. And so we are in some ways playing into the hands of the elected official who wants to cry fake news when we rightly interrogate their actions, because we don't have the countervailing point that shows the plethora of important, also true, good things that we've been writing about in the community. That's not universally true. Some are still doing a lot of that work, I want to be clear, but I do think we've lost a lot of that. And in losing that, we've lost a sense that we truly see and reflect the whole community.
What really gives you, there are lots of reasons for hope. You've talked about a number of those kinds of things. What scares you about what's before us in all of this? Where are the potential minefields out there that right now maybe journalism and news organizations are not even seeing?
Well, I had a breakfast meeting recently with the CEO of a major digital news organization who's become convinced that in 24, 36 months, in all of these places that today we understand to be news deserts, you will see a brand new stood up aura of news organizations available to people, and all of them will be AI generated, and most of it will not be factual information. That's really alarming. I don't know if that is actually what's going to happen or on that timeline, but it feels plausible with where the technology is going and with the increasing lack of discernment, information literacy, et cetera, that we're suffering from. So that is something that it does keep me up at night. How do we combat that? How do we reinstill, really, as I see it as a language, information literacy. So how do we get that learning into the hands of children at the youngest ages? Because that's when we're best equipped to learn a language proficiently. And so I am worried about that because it doesn't feel implausible.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
What do we do about it?
Well, I think I think again, information literacy, media literacy, I think civics education. So some of it is beyond the scope of what just journalism can do. I think that as citizens, we need to demand these things because they are fortifying. They do inoculate against the potential rampant spread of mis and disinformation and bad actors. I think that's really important. But again, insisting on transparency, clear visibility, demystifying the work, I think will be very important to helping to fortify news organizations.
Absolutely. So we sit here at the university, and we try to convince students to consider a future in journalism, and sometimes their parents are with them, and we talk, and of course, mom or dad just chimes right in and says, "Yeah, but you guys don't pay anybody anything." How do we? What do we do about that? About the really paltry salaries in journalism that are discouraging some of our best minds from getting in, because it is a real challenge right now.
Yeah, look, I understand it. My sister and brother-in-law are middle school teachers in Miami-Dade County Public Schools. That's, you want to talk about a analogous situation. I mean, really vital careers, vital roles, vital contribution to society that simply is not compensated in the way that it should be, given how essential it is. And I see journalism that way, and I see teaching that way, and a number of other professions. It's a tough balancing act. I think the bigger challenge that a parent might have, I have young adult children, is maybe less about how much money you might make, but about the stability of their career. And obviously, when you see the headlines and jobs being cut in journalism and news organizations closing, I could see how that could be concerning, especially for a parent. What I would say to that is, the truth is, nothing is guaranteed in this world, and all manner of sectors are disrupted and being disrupted as the world continues to evolve, and technology and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, when you get up in the morning, are you working at something that you can feel incredibly proud to be a part of, and that is making a difference? There's a certain amount of what we do as journalists that is really compensated in the impact that we make. And I get that is not going to help pay the rent. And I don't have the greatest answer and solution for that. But I can tell you that every single day, waking up and doing work, especially on behalf of local communities, you will be making an enormous difference. And I believe we can get on the other side of this and find stability in a business model that works. I absolutely believe that all of you young people who are here and committed to journalism and want to be in the journalism field are going to be the ones that help us find those solutions. And my biggest challenge to you is, besides please go work in local newsrooms, is when you get there, you will have been trained here well on the craft of journalism, but don't cede the knowledge that you also bring, not just about journalism, but about your peers and how you need to create content in order to resonate for them. Maintaining the ethical practices, maintaining the standards, but what has to change? I've intern class after intern class, when I was running newsrooms, they come in and soak up and want to do really good journalism, but I want them to teach us how to best do this work in ways that are going to actually connect and have impact for your peers going forward and the next generations after that. And so you bring a lot to this, to the table, and I don't want you to lose that when you walk in the door of whatever newsroom you end up working at.
That's very good. It's been a while now since the controversies surrounding diversity in newsrooms. Yes, I said it. Ooh. Have kind of raged and subsided. Yet there are communities of all kinds of different people out there that journalism needs to reach, and are a factor in how we approach, making it, seeding the ground for more and more newspapers, more and more news sources out there. Is it still something that you think about, that Knight thinks about, and
Of course.
how do we do it now in this atmosphere?
Look, I think that consistency is important. Values are important. I can say, my whole career, working in newsrooms, it was so evident that if the newsroom itself does not reflect the community, you're not going to have full coverage of that community. You're going to miss angles, you're going to miss sources, you're going to not necessarily understand the facts that you're trying to convey. What is their actual effect on the lives of the people in community if you are not part of the community? So I don't believe newsrooms can do their job effectively if they're not reflective of the communities they cover. That has been true over and over again. And that's a core value, that's a core belief, and I think it hasn't mattered, what political party has been in power. That has been true, and I think that working toward that. At the same time, I think that something that we've seen, in recent years that I think is a positive development is more journalism emanating from different communities, different demographic communities, and again, closer to home, truly authentic, really understanding the issues through the perspective of that community, and doing important, really relevant journalism. And I think that also is important to support, and to continue to see, be strengthened and expand. And so I think it's all of it. But I don't think that, we walk away from something so fundamental and such a core value because the political winds shift. Mm-hmm. If that's what we do, then it wasn't so core to begin with, and I just can't believe that's true.
Thank you for that. Well, we sit here at the University of Florida, and you have visited many university campuses. What do you think universities should do that they're not doing now to advance journalism?
Well, I will say, a few things. One is not just beyond journalism. I think it's so important that our universities be places truly of constructive debate, of engaging, learning again to engage one another, and ideas that might be different and uncomfortable, and doing that in truly curious ways. Journalism at its best is open-minded, is curious, is seeking the truth wherever it shall lead us. And as a people, as a society, we've lost a lot of that. And so I think here in this place, universities, our colleges, et cetera, I think that this is the place where we can hope to recapture that. But we have to be willing to learn again how to engage one another. Knight does, every couple of years, for 20 years, we've done a study on campus free expression, the sentiment among college students related to First Amendment and free expression. And inevitably, students are telling us that the First Amendment, that free expression is absolutely crucial. But increasingly, they're also telling us that they are more likely to self-censor, that they are concerned that words can be as harmful as physical violence, that they think there should be some limits on speech that might be offensive. That's really concerning to me. Not because I want people to be offended or hurt or harmed in any way, obviously, but because how else do we better understanding of one another? How else might we, frankly, change our minds, right? Based on new information or a new perspective or new ideas. So I think that the number one thing that our college campuses can contribute to that's really cross sectors is reanimating that sense of healthy, constructive civil discourse, making it safe and okay to disagree, to be curious, to learn from one another, and frankly, also to walk away sometimes unpersuaded or uncomfortable or even offended and be okay with that. Because we can't get to all the other things we want as a society and all the progress we want to make if we can't do that. It's that fundamental.
As you have, you've had a long career of leading in journalism. As you've gone through that career, what are the things that some of the most, just maybe to the students here, some of the most successful journalists that you've encountered, what do they have in common?
I think it's going to go back to some of the things I was just saying. I mean, absolutely curiosity. And when I say that, I don't mean it in just the most basic of ways, but truly coming into whatever the topic is with a lot of questions, but then truly prepared to listen, to understand, to tap into the nuance, the context, not just take things at face value, but how do they relate to each other? I think that I've seen that over and over again. And the very best journalists were the ones who inevitably came back and said, actually, this story wasn't what I thought it was.
Yeah.
Right? There's this other angle that I hadn't considered, but when I talked to these two people, now I see it, and now that to me is honestly what really journalism needs to be, is meant to be, and where the real power in journalism lies.
Very good. We're about to sort of transition to the next panels that are coming up, and so we have some pretty outstanding journalists in the room who have done some amazing work. As you've seen that work, what do you have to say to those folks?
Thank you. Thank you for being in it, for being in the fight. It's hard. It's hard work. Like I said earlier, it's increasingly difficult. Journalism is under attack. We can make people uncomfortable and angry sometimes, and doing this work is hard. So sticking with it, bringing that level of illumination and clarity that our communities need. There's just nothing that I could see as more important than that. So thank you, is what I would say.
I think that's a pretty good note to end on. Thank you very much for
Thank
being
you.
here.
Thank
We
you.
really appreciate you coming here to Gainesville and being a part of this symposium.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
All righty.